It was just over 100 miles. He was adamant that he was going to get this done. The last text message I sent him would have been asking him if he was still alive.
Everything you could think of was extensively searched, and there was not a single trace of Tony Parsons or the bike, any of his possessions, nothing.
Initially, you've got that emotion. It's like, well, surely they was going to come back. Then you turn to anger, because it's like, where the hell are you? Why are you not home? What has happened?
There was an image that I'll never forget, an image of him on his bike, and it was the last sighting of him just near to a petrol station, and then he was never seen again. It was as if Tony Parsons had just disappeared off the face of the earth.
You want to give the family answers. You want to give them peace of mind, but you can't.
I'd spent 3 years coming to terms with the fact that my dad wasn't coming home. So I was at peace in myself that that was the way that it was going to be. And then all of a sudden, one phone call...
Police Scotland, how can I help you?
...flipped everything upside down.
It was quite a moment. We're actually going to get this family. Some answers here.
My Lord, this case commenced as a missing person inquiry before evolving into an investigation.
We played rugby together. He also coached kids rugby, he refereed. He was quite a stubborn fellow, but generally just a nice guy. I knew he'd had cancer. He decided he was going to do this ride from Fort William to Stirling, get the train up to Fort William, and then cycle back to Stirling. So we all... him some cash to go towards his charity thing.
He asked me if I was interested, and I said I've not ridden a push bike since I was about 15 years old, you know. So I bribed my way out of it. I said, if you do that ride, I'll give you some money towards your charity.
He'd raised money, so that's why he stuck by it.
That was just his sort of stubborn nature, that when he set his mind to do something, he was going to do it. Once he'd started it, he was going to finish it. He got up to Fort William, where he got off the train. And then started the bike ride.
When my dad left on the Friday, I didn't have any contact with him. But that's not unusual. On the Saturday, he hadn't phoned in or checked in with anybody. The phone went straight to answer machine.
I got a message from my sister telling me that he hadn't been in contact. My sister and my mum and I had the conversation as to what my dad's exact plans were. It might have taken a bit longer than he anticipated.
On the Sunday, I decided, right, I'm going to take a drive up, see how he's getting on. He'll either continue or I'd bring him home. I saw absolutely no sign of my dad at that point.
It got to the Sunday evening and we were really starting to get concerned about it.
On the Monday morning, I reported him as a missing person.
I heard the front door go. First, I thought it was Tony, but it wasn't, it was Vicky. She just went, "Mum, I've reported my dad missing." And I went, "This must be bad."
No idea where he was. So my advice at that point was to start searching the roads network from Fort William south.
He's 63, so it's a big cycle to take on for anyone, really. Could have taken unwell and either sought shelter or pulled in at the side of the road somewhere and not been able to seek assistance or help.
The terrain that we were looking at was very mixed. It's mountainous, rivers, moorland.
Could have been hit by a car or a lorry. If he'd been involved in a collision with a car or he'd come off his bike, you'd expect to find some damaged parts of the bike or some clothing, but we weren't getting anything.
There was absolutely no trace of Tony, his bike or his property. We're all frustrated because we knew time was ticking, and if Tony was lying there injured, he wouldn't have survived indefinitely. The pressure was on, well, where is he? The search was brought to a halt on the evening of the Monday night, and the intention was to reconvene at first light the next morning with extra resources.
Margaret phoned me to say Tony had gone on the bike ride and he's not come home. I kind of said, well, he's out there somewhere. Maybe his bike's broke down or something and he'll be a bit late getting back. But you know, Tony always turns up. I never said nothing to Margaret because I didn't want to upset her in any way whatsoever. But my personal thoughts were something's not right here.
To have somebody go missing is a strange feeling because you don't know anything. You have 101 different questions that are going on in your head and you've got no answers to answer any of them.
We understood from Tony's family that he had got the train with his bike up to Fort William. His intention was to cycle down the A82 back towards Stirling direction. When he was first reported missing, it was crucial to try and understand that timeline and get some evidence as to his movements.
For a missing person in an urban area, we've got good opportunities around about CCTV. If you move into the Highland area, you've got much less foot traffic, you've got less CCTV opportunities. Because we knew started cycling Fort William, we went up there first and got CCTV from the train station. So that confirmed for us that he got to Fort William to start the cycle.
His route would be down through here towards Ballachulish and down into Glencoe village. We're really looking for checkpoints then along that route to try and confirm that that was where he went. And it's quite an exposed and uninhabited area, this, so in terms of trying to get some evidence of his route from CCTV, etc., it's very difficult. The next piece of CCTV that we established was at this petrol station. That was able to confirm for us that he had actually continued on his intended route. But there's no further CCTV for probably another 20 miles or so.
That was the last CCTV sighting we had of him before witnesses that speak to him being at the Brzozowski Hotel.
He had reached the Bridge of Orchy Hotel, by which time it was quite late at night. The weather was adverse and he had stopped in there for a refreshment and a break.
We got statements from them confirming that this guy had been in. That Matt Tony's description, so we're pretty confident it was Tony that had been in.
The staff in there actually had suggested he maybe should stay, given the weather conditions. But Tony was determined to continue the journey.
The next place we would expect to see him was at Tyndrum Village. CCTV they had didn't show Tony arriving. So that immediately gets us concerned because naturally you would come through Tyndrum, coming down 82. The fact he didn't appear on CCTV in Tyndrum made us start to look at that journey between Bridge of Orchy and Tyndrum, what's happened to him between those 2 points and what could have happened to him.
Somewhere on that stretch of road, Tony Parsons had vanished off the face of the earth.
There's different stages to this story. The first part is a missing person, and that is not unusual. People go missing in the Highlands a lot for many different reasons. Usually, people are found pretty soon, but the longer that Tony Parsons stays missing, the questions begin to grow and change from where is he, what happened to him, to why isn't he found? Between the Bridge of Orchy Hotel, where he was last seen, and Tyndrum, where he was heading towards, it's only a distance of about 7 miles. Imagine a low, wide valley, flanked by bare mountainsides that are scoured by rivulets. And in the middle, you've got a road and you've got a railway line going through that pass. It's a busy route. Why has no one seen him? Isn't it strange that they haven't found a body, they haven't found a bike, they haven't found any trace of him?
At the end of that week, we'd pretty much exhausted all the physical searching we could do. There was nothing found at all that pertained to Tony or his property. It was a bizarre feeling, you know, at the end, not finding him after all the search activity. He'd literally vanished.
Mountain rescue teams are searching for a man who's been missing for more than a week after setting out on a cycling trip from Fort William to Tillicoultry. 63-year-old Tony Parsons was seen at the Bridge of Orchy Hotel. He left that area and headed south.
It came up in the news that a cyclist had disappeared, and then we realised it was Tony. It was a hell of a shock. I got messages from other friends and former colleagues of Tony saying, is this our Tony? Is this Tony Parsons? This doesn't happen to somebody you know. Somebody disappears. It's unimaginable.
One of the hardest things going through all of this was the fact that we are from a policing background. Being in the police, you know what comes next.
I spent around about 13 years as a member of the police search team. So when it came to the week, there was a definite change in mindset because of the length of time that he would have been without water or without food. That became really difficult. My sister is obviously, she's a serving officer as well, so she was aware of where my mind was going.
The main focus was, how was Mum going to deal with this? How are we going to get her through?
I kept thinking he would just walk in. He would just walk in. I didn't want to think about it being bad. He could come round that corner. I tried not to think about him not coming home.
The resources were committed to that as long as it possibly could. You can't continue to commit resources endlessly to it because there's a new missing person every day. There's no evidence he had been a victim of criminality. There wasn't any evidence that he'd been struck by a car or a lorry or anything at the side of the road either, because there was no debris. You do have to have that conversation with family to say the realistic chance is that we're not going to have the outcome that we all want, to find that person still alive.
There was no sign of my dad. Therefore, he would be treated as a long-term missing person. We now know that he'll either walk through the door one day with a miraculous reason as to why he's not been in contact, or he potentially could be found by a dog walker. These are the ones I like.
Nice photos. I met Tony when I was working on Saturday Job on the Market. I got married at 17. Tony was in the Navy. I loved him in uniform. Honestly, you'd see him in uniform and you'd just light up. He was on submarines, so we moved up to Scotland because that's where he was based. I was very proud of Tony. Very proud of what he did.
Powering through a Scottish loch, warming up for another patrol, dwarfing the men who run it, this is HMS Resolution, the oldest of Britain's 4 Polaris missile submarines.
Tony and I, we were on 2 submarines together. This is the beach in Helmsburg. Up to the north is Faslane, the submarine base.
We were both on the same submarine for quite a while. Tony was a great guy for me. He is single-minded at times. If he sets his mind to do something, he's going to do it by hook or by crook. But he's such a generous bloke.
You'd see for anything from probably 4 to 16 weeks is the longest I did. And you've got to be able to get on with people.
Action stations, action station.
He was a good guy. If Tony could do you a favour, he would do you a favour.
Tony was away quite a bit. That was difficult because you were at home with children. You had to be mum and dad.
Seeing him coming back from a tour with the submarine coming up the Clyde with the people on top of the conning tower waving was always something that I looked forward to.
Then we'd have to come back to reality of knowing that the dad was going to go away again.
When we'd go on patrol, your wife knew that you were gone, and you'd be gone for 2 or 3 months or whatever. They knew you were probably in the Atlantic somewhere, but they knew we were coming home. But when Tony then disappeared on the bike ride, that was a completely different kettle of fish. Margaret would have no clue what was going on. He was due home the next day, and he didn't come home.
On the 29th of September 2017, father of 2, Tony Parsons, set off from his home near Alloa in Scotland to take part in a charity bike ride. But he went missing and hasn't been seen since. This morning, his family and police are appealing for your help to find him. Duke Sinclair, Chief Inspector, you're leading this investigation. Tell us about what we last know about Tony's movements.
Yes, on Friday the 29th of September 2017, Tony boarded a train in Alloa to Fort William. We then know that he was seen on CCTV passing a garage in Glencoe just after 6 o'clock the same evening. It was then about 20 past 11 that night that he entered a hotel in the Bridge of Orchy, where he stopped for a coffee before carrying on again southbound on the A82 on his journey towards Tyndrum. That's the last confirmed sighting we have of Tony, and we're appealing for anyone who may have seen Tony, his clothing or his bright yellow bike after the Bridge of Orchy to come forward.
You have people that go missing short-term, medium-term and long-term. Initially, you've got that emotion that, yeah, you want to find them. It then turns into disbelief. It's like, well, surely they're going to come back. They're not going to be away for so long. Then you turn to anger, because it's like, where the hell are you? Why are you not home? What has happened?
It is unusual. It's pretty unique. There aren't that many long-term missing persons that we have going on. We're intrigued, we want to know what happened to people. So to have an unanswered mystery like this, we just want to know. We want to know for the family, we want to know ourselves what happened to them. Once we've done everything we can in terms of the usual inquiries, it moves into an annual review phase. I did the annual review in 2020. By this point, he's been missing for 3 years. We looked at everything. Because it's so remote, there was very few people that were there that might have seen him. It became a hope that one day, as part of the clearing of the woods on the sides of the road, that maybe we would get some answer for Tony's family. But as those woods were being cleared, we still weren't getting anything. I was more and more concerned that maybe he had been the victim of crime. One possible explanation was he's been struck by a vehicle travelling on the road on his bike between the Bridge of Orchy Hotel and Tyne-Drum. Because we haven't recovered the bike, because there's no obvious debris on the road between those points, we had to look at, could somebody have taken him into a vehicle? He's been taken into a car, a van, a lorry that's hit him and moved from that point. One of the things we looked at was a CCTV from Glencoe. As cars were coming through Glencoe, the next time we were picked up would be at Tyne-Drum. We looked at every car that came through Glencoe to Tyne-Drum through that period that we knew Tony was cycling that area to see the timescale of them travelling between the 2 points. All we're looking for is any cars or lorries that were taking longer than they should have taken. Have they stopped? Have they hit him? Have they picked him up from the side of the road and then continued their journey? That didn't give us anything. We could see that the vehicles that did travel along that road were all travelling in the time frame we'd expect. Without any other information that we had that was going to come forward, there was nothing else really for us to do.
Have gone. People never give up hope of finding people in this part of the world. So it becomes part of local knowledge. You're aware that Tony Parsons is missing. So when you go a walk, or even if you are just stopping by the side of the road for 5 minutes, you're always thinking, is he here? There were lots of rumours from people in this part of the world about what had happened to him.
One of the key parts of the investigation is the witnesses that have been spoken to initially and what they told us at that time and what they know now. Has there been any change in that? So review all the witness statements. One of the things we picked up on was a letter that had been received by the police shortly after the missing person report was received. It was anonymous. It was about twins from Tyne-Drum that were repeatedly driving under the influence of alcohol, potentially in the Bridge of Orchy Hotel the night that Tony went missing. We identified the twins, looked at had they been spoken to at the time, and yes, they had.
They were known to be involved in deer stalking on that estate. There's a suggestion of taking clients back and forth between the Orc estate and the Bridge of Orchy Hotel, which would involved driving up and down that only road that connected those two locations, which also happens to be the road that Tony Parsons has been cycling on.
I wanted to know more from them about, well, were they in the hotel? Did they see Tony that night? I took a decision to go and see them, and they were able to confirm that yes, they were in the Bridgerocky Hotel that night. Having dinner with one of the stalking parties, and they were going out the next morning to take them out stalking deer. So they recalled it, remembered that night, they'd left the hotel and they were away early because they were up early the next day. I didn't get a flavour from them at that point that they were holding something back. The letter's anonymous, so we can't go back to the source to say, well, how do you know this information and how can we build on that? It doesn't put any light of suspicion on them. There was a lot of people in the hotel, so we can't say they had any direct involvement. And also, we had no clarity about whether Tony had been the victim of a crime or not. So nobody was being approached as a suspect at that point. It comes back to people. People are critical. So witnesses, an eyewitness, or somebody who can give you information you didn't know before. What the review does often do is prompt people to start coming forward. People that maybe not spoken to us for their own reasons, that decide they want to come and tell us the truth.
Good morning, it's the Police Scotland. How can I help you?
I wish to report information about a crime that happened 3 years ago in Bridgerocky. A hit and run. Disposal of body and blind, I believe. The man's name was Tony Parsons. It was a recent partner who disclosed it to me. I can't believe it. I can't feel good.
Right, and is there any reason why you've left it 3 years, ma'am?
No, I've only just had a relationship with this man. I've only found out about a week, 10 days ago.
And do you believe that this man's genuine in what he was telling you?
Absolutely.
What's his name, please?
Alexander McKellar and his twin brother, Robert McKellar.
What's your name, please, ma'am?
Dr. Caroline Muirhead.
And you're reporting a murder?
Yes. Hello? My name is Tony Parsons. It's on the BBC website. It's the biggest unsolved crime area. It was on the 29th of September 2017.
There's a lot of mysteries, unsolved deaths where people phone up and provide information to the police to suggest that they hold the key to solving it, and you know when you listen to it in the first instance that the person's not credible. But there's a lot of detail in that initial call that starts to make you up in the mountains. They were both into hunting. Totally different to the type of person routinely that, you know, we would encounter.
Caroline and Sandy, I would never put the two of them together. You have Caroline, who's from the city, from Glasgow, been to university. And then I had Sandy, who was from a working farm environment, lived in an estate. It was a whirlwind relationship. I actually think that Caroline didn't just fall in love with Sandy, she fell in love with the Bridge of Orchy. She loved the outdoors. He would take her shooting.
Caroline had said, I had a bit of a realisation that I don't really know this guy too well. I would quite like to know if there's any skeletons in the closet, was how she described it, that are good.
Was that I've killed somebody. We hit a cyclist. We didn't even see him. We stopped, we got out the car. He was in the lay-by. To show the exact spot he did, he pointed it out. And she left a Red Bull can. She said she deliberately dropped a Red Bull can at the point where Sandy said Tony was buried. And then she says, "You're going to have to move quick with this." And I said, "Well, why?" The mood in the room changes.
what came out of that conversation when he was showing her where the body was telling her about the potential plans to remove the body from its location and dispose of it forever.
What she says is, Sandy says that he's really, really worried about where he's buried the body. The area where Tony Parsons is buried is peaty. Bodies preserved better in peat. There's potential works going to be getting done close to that viaduct. Water company's been coming in and looking at it. We're on the 27th of December, and what she's telling us is that Sandy's planning to dig the body up and burn it on the 31st. It's dark and she's scared, and she's just trying to remain calm and trying to make him think that she's okay with what he's telling her. As Caroline's telling me this and I'm noting this statement, I believe every word she's telling me. I know Anthony Parsons is buried in that estate, and that we need to get moving and we need to go get him. We need to act on this and we need to move it now.
We weren't ever going to find them. We weren't going to get the answers. So I was at peace in myself that that was the way that it was going to be. And then all of a sudden, one phone call flipped everything upside down.
It was just after New Year. There was a buzz going around about the office that there was a potential for a missing person to be recovered in a remote area. We've got a spot, an actual spot up in the Highlands now, and it was basically under everybody's nose throughout the whole 3 years that he'd been a missing person.
We're police officers, so rightly or wrongly, when these type of inquiries come in, we will get quite excited about them because we like puzzles, we like solving cases. We all knew this is going to be a big inquiry for us. We've got a warrant to go and take control of the York estate, search that for the remains of Tony Parsons, and arrest Sandy and Robert to bring them in for initial questioning.
There was obviously a whole host of work to be done within the York estate in terms of how the dig for that body would look and would progress. But on that day one, when we executed the warrant, we just had to get control. We found the twins and they were arrested and taken into custody and taken to Helen Street Police Office in Glasgow. They were suspects here. We had been given specific information that these two individuals had put the body there because they had unlawfully killed him on the A82 by running him over and deciding to dispose of the body. They need to be asked some questions to account for that. And that's what we did simultaneously to taking control of the estate where they stayed.
I think when I first encountered them, they would have been 28, 29. They weren't identical twins, but they looked very, very, very similar to each other. They're big, strong, strapping farmers, I suppose, to be honest with you, is how they looked. They hadn't really had much previous experience with police. We had this, suspicion, might they just unburden themselves, might they just talk to us. They're two boys from a small community, they're not criminal masterminds. We were thinking they're twins, which is a really strange dynamic as well. So, part of that plan was let's interview them at the same time and let's see what they're saying, and then let's see, if we can use that in each interview.
Caroline had given us the initial information that Robert and Sandy had collided with Tony and they had disposed of his body. We didn't have any further evidence at that point. We haven't yet started to try and locate the body. We've only got the story that Caroline's told us, and we can't give information at that stage that's going to put her in danger. So the questions they were asked were fairly limited. They were simply asked, we have information that you are involved in the death of Tony Parsons, and then seek a response in relation to that.
The time is 13:45 hours on Wednesday the 30th of December 2020.
When you're bringing someone in for interview, they don't have a clue about what information you hold, who's told you, where it's came from, how much you know. You must be sitting in that interview thinking, how did that end up here and how do they know so much?
Did you try and cover up?
I was monitoring those interviews in Helen Street Police Office in Glasgow when they were taking place. They're both quite different in their demeanour.
You've been arrested on suspicion of Section 3 RTA 1988 and attempt to pervert the course of justice. Do you understand that, Robert? Okay, you're nodding your head. Does that mean that you do understand that, yeah? What's your name?
Alexander Gardner McKellar.
What's your age?
29.
Your current occupation?
Well, self-employed.
Sandy, actually, I'd say personality-wise, he had a bit of charm about him. We've always thought that Sandy was the sort of one who was more in control, who would call the shots, who would influence what they were doing.
What is it you do? Self-employed?
Well, farmer, anything to do with the farm, really.
Okay.
You can see here on the screen from the way Sandy is that his body language is quite open. You can see the open arms, open shoulders. There's a confidence and an arrogance to him. He's telling us what he does. He's answering questions about his cell.
You're going to be asked questions about your involvement in offences under Section 3A of the Road Traffic Act 1988. That is causing the death of another, using a vehicle whilst unfit through drink or drugs, and an attempt to pervert the course of justice. You're not bound to answer, but if you do, your answers will be recorded, may be noted, and may be used in evidence. Do you understand that?
Yep.
What does that mean to you?
Well, I've given a statement to the CID already regarding this, so all of my further answers will be no comment.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Right, that's fine. I understand that. Okay, Sandy, would you be able to tell me what your hobbies are?
No comment.
Hunting. What do you do to relax?
No comment.
Do you have time to relax?
No comment.
Do you find yourself quite a busy person?
No comment.
What kind of person would you describe yourself as?
No comment.
Would you describe yourself as an honest person?
No comment.
Would you consider yourself as a reliable person?
No comment.
It's only when his interview progresses and the questions start getting a lot more difficult and a lot more into detail that you see he starts to get a bit more closed off.
What can you tell me about your involvement, if any, in the disappearance of Anthony Parsons, who went missing on the 29th of September 2017?
So no comment yet.
Have you ever been involved in a road accident involving a cyclist?
No comment.
Have you ever been involved in a crime and tried to cover it up?
No comment.
Can you tell me what you were doing on Friday the 29th of September 2017?
No comment.
Your brother Sandy?
We always thought Robert was a wee bit more submissive.
Part of the inquiry, part of the missing person inquiry, so yeah, the credibility was all there. The majority of our work is city-based, is based in Glasgow. So you're working in high-rises, you're working in the estates. This was an alien environment to work in, an alien environment for most of the inquiry team. You don't expect a crime.
Circumstances when I'm investigating a murder in a private place, it's a house. Getting a warrant to then seize and search a house is fairly simple. Getting a warrant to seize and search an estate in the Highlands, we've got to secure a vast, vast area. How do you get control of something that big? What does that look like? Where do we even start?
We're heading up to Tyndrum, and then the road that takes you up into the gateway to the Highlands. It's a stunning day just now, but when we came up here, this was snow and ice, sub-zero temperatures. We were sent up in the 4x4 some mornings beforehand to make sure that the rest of the crews could get through because of the snow on this road, make sure the snow gates were open. This next bit of the journey, as you continue up the 82 towards Fort William, up round the corner up here, and it just opens up round in front of you. Still gets me to this day as well, but how small you feel here. This area is huge. You stand down at the bottom of these glens down here and you're doing nothing but craning your head to look up. You're just surrounded on either side by mountains. Personally, for myself, it's tainted, but the beauty of it and the fact that this is where Tony spent his final journey cycling down here It is quite a surreal place to be. This is the estate just as we come round the corner here. What you're seeing ahead of is in there, that's all part of the Auchie estate. This is all part of what we basically had as part of our warrant for the estate. It was just as you would expect of a general farm. It was the initial farmhouse. You went by the estate gardens, the estate buildings. And then you continued out by the river, by some old derelict cottages. You had to drive through a river. Up the other side of the banking, and that led you up to the viaduct. When I say breathtaking, it was just silence and beautiful.
This is open ground. Would be almost impossible to find a body here unless you knew exactly where it was. Caroline had said Sandy gave her quite specific detail as to where the body was buried. And she dropped a can of Red Bull that she'd been drinking from and stamped it into the ground. That was effectively her marking the spot so that she could give the police a direction as to exactly where the body would be found.
Without that information, it came to us just searching in a needle in a haystack. You very rarely get somebody coming forward with as much direct information as that and say,
If you were to tell this story to anybody who doesn't work in our field of work, you would probably think, well, he's told his girlfriend that this is where the body is. That's enough. We can't just jump to the conclusion that must be true. We've got a story, but we don't have a case.
It's difficult to imagine the agony that the family went through in not knowing where Mr. Parsons was and what happened to him. That just compounded as time went on.
you're looking for somebody's loved one and they are relying on you for answers. It's a very heavy burden to carry.
The location was remote. If someone was trying to dispose of a body, you could be there and no one would see you.
Everything has seemed so surreal. It's like a story that's going on. You're just part of a story. Suddenly you get that bad telephone call.
You're now going to be asked questions about your involvement in the murder of Anthony Parsons and attempting to defeat the course of justice. Do you understand?
I do, yes.
Do you genuinely have no remorse that you killed a man and buried him, leaving his family without any idea where he was for 3 years?
No comment.
This case has been different in every single hour of every single day I've worked on it, right to the end.
Caroline was the key to this in terms of she was the one who uncovered all of this story through the course of her relationship with Sandy.
Caroline had been cited to attend, and she had...
The Red Bull can was our starting point, but she had been given further specific information from Sandy that standing at that point, looking in a particular direction, looking at a landmark in that direction, and a number of metres from that point, that is where he indicated is where the body was. It was 3 years since this body had been buried there, so to the untrained eye, all the ground looked the same. The plan moving forward was a case of who do we need to help us here? External specialists, because we need people who can provide their expertise with ground conditions, who can assist us with digging and filtering through earth.
And that's where Professor Lorna Dawson came in.
All cases that you work on are special, and distinctive and unique. But there is something about this particular investigation that will stay with me forever. I got a phone call from the SIO. They asked me if I could go along to the site and see if there were any clues with the soil or the vegetation, and whether there might be an area where someone might have been buried a few years ago. The location was remote. There was snow covering the mountains, and there were no sounds but the wild animals, the birds. And I think that's quite important, because if someone was trying to dispose of a body, you could be there and no one would see you digging a grave.
When you got there and you saw the Red Bull can, it was moorland, it was heath, heather.
There was a track, and either side of the track there were clumps of vegetation. But there was an area of about 2 metres by 1 metre. It had obviously been disturbed fairly recently because the soil was mixed up, so that the dark, deep peat was exposed. And it had left an impervious surface. The water sat on that peat, and because it was so cold, ice had formed. That was unusual because it was the only bit that had ice and moss only. All the other areas had shrubs.
It was her professional opinion. That's like a deposition site there where Tony has potentially been put. You could see that something had gone on there.
I thought it supported what the witness had told the police. That's the area that the excavation has to focus on.
You know you're looking for somebody's loved one, and they're relying on you for answers. It's a very heavy burden to carry.
So there was quite a large team of experts required. Forensic archaeologists, they were able to very carefully skim off, using tiny brushes and tiny spatulas, layers centimetres deep. And each of those layers could be carefully looked through, just to make sure that we didn't lose any potential evidence.
It was a very methodical, very structured event.
But as we went down, I'll always remember the moment where we saw this little piece of red fabric. That was the colour of the fabric that Mr. Parsons was wearing when he was last seen cycling home that day.
And I'm getting goosebumps down my back again here, talking about it. Immediately everything was stopped and a phone call went in back to senior management. We've got the sleeve of a red jacket here.
Carefully, the two anthropologists removed the peat from around Mr. Parsons. And it is an image that will stay with me. Mr. Parsons was about 50 centimetres down. It's quite a cold, constant temperature at that depth. The preservation of the cold, wet peat had kept Mr. Parsons so well that he still looked like the images of him on the day that he disappeared.
That was Tony. When I saw him face to face, that was Tony.
You want to know the answers, but realistically, you don't. And it's not a case of that you're thinking about yourself. You suddenly become, how am I going to look after everybody else? When you're having to stand there and watch your mum absolutely break down, it's tough. It really is tough.
They came out and they told me that they'd found Tony. Obviously, my words were, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" And they said yes. The injuries that Tony had were horrific.
My mum was an absolute wreck, because at that moment, all her hopes of ever having that possibility of seeing my dad again were just gone. There was nothing left.
We had mountain rescue in with us to lift Tony's body. The weather was atrocious that day. It was very low cloud cover. We got everybody into position. Everything had to be done right, and there was suddenly a shout, and it was the diggerman. Guys, stop, look. Now, all morning, you couldn't see the hills surrounding you. And at that point of time, the cloud had lifted, and we must have been surrounded by about 40 red deer. We are standing there ready to lift Tony out of there, and these wild animals, they're just standing watching us. We all just took a breath, looked at each other, and then that was it. We lifted Tony up and out. It was quite a moment.
We're all made up of molecules, these elements that make us our body, but there is the soul. It could have gone unsolved. He could have still been in that cold, dark place alone. Once you've put a loved one to rest, they are at rest, and that the family have somewhere to go and grieve.
I didn't personally feel that bad about it, because I'd expected it. I had been waiting 3.5 years for that news. So it wasn't as big a shock. Being told that he was found buried, that made me feel physically sick. How? Why?
Where Tony was recovered was an area where there was kill pits. It's where the farmer or the gamekeeper will dig a pit basically and dispose of fallen livestock. Anything that had been shot by sporting tourists basically on the estate that wasn't required for meat was disposed of by the estate in this kill pit. Words can't describe what would go through somebody's head to put another human being into that position. They're horrible.
Charged. Why are they back out into their communities? What's going on?
The boys went to school here. They had a huge group of friends here. Everybody knew them. People knew their parents. No one could quite believe the calculated way in which this appeared to be unfolding at that time, that not only had this poor man been killed, but he had also been killed in a way where his body was hidden.
If you were to tell this story to anybody who doesn't work in our field of work, you would probably think, well, he's told his girlfriend that this is where the body is. She's told the police, and lo and behold, The police have dug in that location and found the body. But we can't just jump to the conclusion that because he told Caroline that it was him and his brother who were responsible for this, then that must be true. Other people could be involved here.
At that point, it becomes a whole new dynamic of investigation. Don't bury yourself in a peat bog, so we know we're dealing with criminality. It's just exactly what crimes do we have, what we're looking to prove, what we're looking to show.
There wasn't any DNA found on any of the clothing or on the body itself to link it back to the people responsible. We've got a story, but we don't have a case. We've got to find evidence that links them to this crime.
The car Sandy had been driving that night had been seized, but then we were able to do quite a lot of inquiry round about it, and we were able to actually, believe it or not, track back, and we were able to show that that car did have damage on the night that Anthony Parsons went missing.
Other people who worked in the Ock estate were able to see the significant damage to the car before it was taken away to be repaired.
Sandy and Robert had given the explanation that they'd struck a deer that night.
And that was really significant because we were able to establish that every time that car had been damaged previously, through the insurance, it had went to a specific garage to be repaired. On this occasion, the vehicle didn't go to that place. There was no report to the insurance.
That was really, really interesting, because if you had just struck a deer, why would you not claim your insurance?
Not only that, the place the vehicle had been taken to for repair was miles away.
Actually, the garage owner still had images. That car did have near side damage to it, which would be consistent of where they would have struck a cyclist.
It just adds another wee piece to the puzzle and another wee piece of evidence required to convict these individuals.
When my dad was found, we found out at that point that there was potentially a road accident and that my dad had been struck. One of the hardest things going through all of this was the fact that we didn't know the details because of our profession, my brother and I, being in the police. We also knew, don't ask questions.
When the inquiry seized their mobile phones, we could see the conversations that were going on between the brothers and other people. We then found a video. You could see the dashboard, the cockpit of a 4x4 truck, and it was on that stretch of road heading between the Bridge of Orchy to Tyndrum, and you saw a hand lifting up a can of Tennent's, shouting cheers and laughing. I remember myself and my colleague that were looking at the phones were like, couldn't believe what we were seeing in front of us. This is a joke to them. Quite sickening, to be honest with you.
There was also text messages and social media comments that tended to suggest other people knew more about the circumstances than they were telling us.
One person said, "I think about this all the time. I'm relatively local and we've known who did it for ages. They were drunk driving, hit Tony and buried his body on their property. Someone tipped off the police, hence them searching and finding the body." So that suggests that there was a lot of local knowledge.
Whilst all of this was ongoing, the relationship between Caroline and Sandy continued.
I think Caroline thought that she had to try and get more evidence for us. As part of that, she would re-engage with Sandy. She was so involved with wanting to help. Obviously, first and foremost, we were just really concerned about her and her safety. But she supplied us with her phone and supplied us with recordings which were entered as part of the evidence.
She talks at one point, Robert definitely told her that when they got out of the car, there was a moan coming from the body and he was obviously still alive. That then tied in with the information we received from the expert pathologists.
It was quite upsetting pathology results because there probably could have been a period of up to half an hour for which he would have been alive after the point of impact. The last thing you want to think is that that was somebody's last half hour. He would have known he was dying and he would have known he was in the middle of nowhere and he would have known there wasn't help coming, and that's really sad.
At the point in time when they have realised that he is at the side of the road and is still alive, a reasonable person would be making a decision to get somebody help.
See if he'd have just phoned 999 and held his hand and told him it was going to be okay in that last half hour, well, you know, that's what most people would do.
Tony may have died anyway, but they had decided he was definitely going to die, and this was crucial in determining what charges would be relevant.
The first question for the prosecution service is whether a crime has been committed. Now, when human remains are found in a remote area, buried in a peat bog, that obviously gives rise to the likelihood that a criminal act has been committed. The next challenge was to decide what the nature of that crime was. Murder in Scotland can be committed in one of two ways. One, with a wicked intention to kill. The person that shoots someone else dead without any justification would be guilty of murder, and there's no difficulty with that. Equally, if the attacker demonstrates such wicked recklessness as to demonstrate that he does not care whether the victim lives or dies, then that can amount to murder too.
Robert and Sandy did not set out to kill Tony Parsons, but when they've struck him with a vehicle, if the evidence suggests he was still alive at that point, they can look at the state of Tony at that point in time and maybe reach the conclusion in their mind it's unlikely he'll survive. But if you're not medically qualified, how can you make that decision?
This was not straightforward. If Mr. Parsons was killed instantly, then the charge would probably have simply been causing death by dangerous driving, because there's no suggestion that the accused set out to kill Mr. Parsons. The difference with this case was that, knowing he was alive after the collision, they decided not to recruit help for him.
They have formed a plan in their mind to put him into the ground and conceal this fact forever. It's a sliding doors moment, and that's where the murderous intent comes in.
It seemed to me that an argument could be made out for murder.
You're not bound to answer, but if you do, your answers will be recorded and may be noted and may be used in evidence. Do you understand?
I do, yes.
The time is 15:08 hours on Tuesday, 1st of December 2021. At this time, we're within interview room number 4 at London Road Police Office. Yep. Can you confirm your name?
It's Alexander Gardner McKellar.
Your age?
Is 29.
Can I ask you your name, please?
Robert McKellar.
And your age, please, Robert?
This is 11 months down the line from the first arrest. On this occasion, the two twins were arrested that morning for murder.
When we first spoke to them, we had a lot more limited information, but much further down the line, we obviously had a full case built against them, so it was to bring them in and put all the evidence that we had to them to see if they would provide us with what had happened in their own words, or if they would tell us how they could live so long without telling anyone what Tony was.
So you're now going to be asked questions about your involvement in the murder of Anthony Parsons and attempting to defeat the course of justice. You're not bound to answer, but if you do, your answers will be recorded and may be noted and may be used in evidence. Do you understand?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
They probably both spent those 11 months wondering when we're coming back, and I think there maybe was a little bit of thinking they'll maybe never charge us. Well, One of the things from Robert's interview was the work we're going to round about the truck. I think there's almost like that belief where people don't think you're going to quite dig as much as you do dig.
Did Robert speak?
No, he didn't. He never gave us anything significant, and neither did Sandy, to be honest with you.
The only real reaction from Sandy during the interview was when the recordings were played. The recordings that we'd retrieved from Caroline Muirhead.
Police seized a laptop, which was later examined. On that laptop were several recordings, including a conversation between you and her in the morning of the 23rd of February 2021. So that's going to be one of the audio clips up here. In all conversations, not once do you deny being responsible. Why not, if you're honest?
No comment.
You state it was either my life or his. What did you mean by that?
Doesn't sound like me, to be honest. It sounds like it's been messed with.
It's in hands.
He wasn't happy to accept that it was him.
Certainly not me that's had that conversation.
Enhancements went to a forensic lab. It's all been checked.
I don't know, I can't explain it, sorry.
To actually hear a recorded conversation, that's probably why he's reacted to that at that point, when it's actually been put in front of him and he knows it's real.
You continue, fucking stupid cunt, shouldn't have been there. Zero remorse for Mr. Parsons or his family. Have you no regrets about what you've done?
No comment.
When you've been immersed in an inquiry like that for 11 months, when you reach the stage whereby you know you're going to get it over the line and you're going to get it.
Been remanded.
Okay, time is now 18:55 hours now, concluding the interview with Robert McKellar.
Ultimately, that's what you've spent a year working on. That's what the long nights or the time away for your family is all about, just trying to get to that point. So it's a really, really satisfying moment. It's probably one of the best parts of the job, when you're able to charge somebody with a serious crime.
Both were charged with murder and attempting to defeat the ends of justice in terms of disposing of the body afterwards in the manner in which they did.
I was asked to represent the interests of Alexander Sandy McKellar. I saw him in prison where he had been remanded at that stage. I thought it would resolve by way perhaps of a plea causing death by dangerous driving and also a very serious attempt to prevent the course of justice because the body obvious murder to me. The Crown case was that their actings were wickedly reckless and therefore they were guilty of murder.
On that occasion, the first accused offered to plead guilty to causing death by dangerous driving.
There was no dispute about the fact that Sandy was the driver, and so that was submitted. The Crown did not indicate they were going to accept that.
I rejected that plea. I did not think that that was adequate in the whole circumstances of the case. Openly and fairly, but the jury will be told that sympathy plays no part in this, and neither does morals, because it's a court of law and not a court of morals.
When the McKellar brothers first came up into the dock and they took their seat, I watched their every move. I wanted to know whether or not they were going to look at us. They didn't. Stern kept looking straight ahead. And all I wanted to do was to say to them, why?
As a family, we've had nothing from them. When you've done that, the impact that that has had, the ripple effect of that night has impacted me, my sister, my mum, my children, you know, my dad's friends.
There was a group of us went through to the trial and we sat not far, 2 or 3 rows behind them, and we were watching them.
They came in all clean shaven, wearing suits, trying to look respectable and everything else. But you could tell it was pure arrogance.
I knew I couldn't approach them. But I just wanted to see them react. I wanted to know what was going through their mind.
The evidence was that Mr. Parsons was alive after the collision and that the accused knew that. But it was not a straightforward case by any means, and it would be difficult to present to the jury.
Call the Diet, His Majesty's Advocate against Alexander McKellar and Robert McKellar. Please be seated. Thank you.
Advocate Deputy.
Thank you, my lord. I regret that I move that the case be adjourned until tomorrow morning.
Very well, thank you.
The Crown were having difficulties in citing Caroline to appear for the trial.
Caroline was the key to this in terms of the evidence that she had gathered through the course of her relationship with Sandy and the manner in which she had been assisting the police investigation. So there was quite a bit of anxiety as to how things would go at the trial in relation to Caroline providing her evidence.
The second day is the day when the jury turns up and actually are put into the jury box and so on. Caroline had been cited to attend and she hadn't turned up.
The trial was underway and I actually got a phone call from the brother's father to say, Caroline's here, she's on the estate. I was like, what do you mean she's on the estate? I knew that that was the day that she had to go to court to give evidence.
To pin your murder charge on that particular witness was a wee bit of a surprise to me, I think.
They last saw her heading up into the valley towards Loch Lyon. I let my supervisors know immediately. You'd better phone the Crown. Caroline is nowhere near Glasgow High Court.
She was effectively missing, and clearly everybody was concerned about what had happened to her, where she was.
It just so happened that one of the gamekeepers and an officer were going up the side of the loch and Caroline was found.
In these circumstances, I invite His Lordship to adjourn until tomorrow morning.
Well, in the whole circumstances, I'm inclined to grant the motion. We'll adjourn until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and we will assess the situation at that point.
She was clearly struggling to deal with the circumstances on that particular day.
This case has been different every single hour of every single day I've worked on it, right to the end. And during the trial, it was a pretty unique set of circumstances.
We thought the two of them were going to be charged with murder, but I think it was day 3. I just felt that something weren't right here. That, you know, I just had that feeling.
Advocate Depute.
Thank you, my Lord. I'm grateful for the extra time afforded today, and I can advise that there has been a development in the case, and I would propose to amend the indictment. Recognising that proving the murder charge was not going to be straightforward, it did seem to me that a charge of culpable homicide would be sufficient in the circumstances of this case. My Lord, in relation to charge number 1, in line 11, to delete the word murder and substitute the word kill.
Now, Mr. McConaughey.
Yes, Lord. I have instructions to tender a plea of guilty to charge 1, which is, as your Lordship is aware, now a charge of culpable homicide.
And that was then accepted, with the result that the case did not go to a jury as a trial, but was a guilty plea. Okay, my Lord, those pleas are acceptable to the Crown.
The difference between a conviction for murder and a conviction for culpable homicide is huge. And also the fact that Sandy's brother would no longer be on the homicide charge. They were two very important factors. It probably wasn't a particularly difficult decision for Sandy to make, even although he knew the outcome would be he would get a significant custodial sentence.
A change of plea by the accused is not an unusual thing. We do strive to try and avoid that happening at the trial. It's unfortunate that it happens at that late stage, but it does happen.
Well, I can see why it happened, because if you went for murder and you couldn't prove it, then there's a chance that we're getting off. Don't make it right.
When we found out that the McKellars had made a plea, that didn't sit well with me. My initial thought was, they're going to go down and they're taking the truth with them. So by pleading, not only have they robbed me of my father, but they've robbed me of knowing the truth.
My Lord, I move for sentence. His Lordship will see that the previous convictions for Alexander McKellar are dangerous driving, driving with an excess of alcohol, and in 2012 he was convicted of careless driving. My Lord, I would propose that the Crown and Defence prepare an agreed narrative, because the case is fairly complex and there's quite a bit to say. There would be insufficient time to conclude that today.
Thank you very much.
When they get out of jail, they're going to go back to life as if nothing's happened. They're going to get on with it. They're going to enjoy themselves. I can't do that. I can't do that because Tony's not here. they're not the one that are left with a life sentence. I am. Because that's what they've done.
My Lord, this case commenced as a missing person inquiry before evolving into an investigation. Around July 2017, Anthony Parsons decided to engage in a cycle from Fort William to his home address in Tillicoultry. His wife, Margaret Parsons, received text messages from his mobile asking how she was and confirming that he had arrived in Fort William. This was the last contact she had with her husband. Around 2300 hours, Mr. Parsons attended at the Bridge of Orchy Hotel. He was wet due to the adverse weather. It was suggested to him that he should stay the night in the hotel. However, after having a coffee, he left the hotel to continue his cycle and travelled south on his intended route.
You could see them shaking their heads with what was being said. I know, man, it was really, really difficult to watch that.
My Lord, so far as the accused are concerned, the accused, Alexander McKellar, after consuming alcohol, drove with Robert McKellar as a passenger on a journey from the Bridge of Orchy Hotel to their home on the Och Estate a few miles away. During the journey, in adverse weather conditions, at night and at speed, the vehicle collided with Anthony Parsons, who was, at the time, riding his bicycle. After seriously injuring Anthony Parsons, Alexander McKellar ascertained that Mr. Parsons was still alive. He did not call the emergency services, thereby preventing any prospect of Mr. Parsons receiving medical treatment.
He will have been in massive amounts of pain. So then to not seek any form of medical treatment from that is just 100% inhumane.
It was horrible to hear what they'd done. And I'm not talking about the fact they knocked him off his bike with the car. It's what they did after.
Without immediate medical assistance, he would have been unlikely to survive longer than 20 to 30 minutes. Police inquiry confirmed that the quickest emergency medical response would have taken approximately 1 hour if any assistance had been sought.
The outcome of what would have happened, how long it would have taken an ambulance to get there, is irrelevant. If you know that you've hit somebody, you can see that they are still alive. Any basic human instinct says you need to try and get help.
They just wanted to protect themselves. They could have phoned for somebody. They could have phoned an ambulance, they could have phoned the police. They could have even done it anonymously. But they didn't.
The two accused left the scene in the vehicle and returned in a different vehicle, collected Mr. Parsons' body and bicycle and transported him to the Och Estate, whereby they left him overnight. After attending with a shooting party the next day, the body was taken to a peaty area on the estate. A grave was dug and the body placed in it and covered.
I do remember the full story being read out in court line by line, and it really was, it was a real shock.
What they did was callous. That's not actions of a drunken man, not the day after. This is the actions of somebody who's trying to cover up a crime.
To willingly go down a course of action whereby you are letting somebody die, that to me is murder. And our opinion will always be the same. They have murdered my dad and they've taken him away from us.
Such was the location that if Alexander McKellar had not disclosed where the grave was, the remains are unlikely to have Anthony Parsons was 63 at the time of his death. He was a much-loved husband, father, brother, grandfather and friend. He had very close community ties. My Lord, those are the submissions for the Crown.
Robert McKellar and Alexander McKellar, please stand. You will next appear before me for the matter of sentence. You will continue to be detained. That's all.
There's been no remorse. Absolutely nothing from them at all. To be honest, I hate the both of them. I really do.
His Majesty's Advocate against Alexander McKellar and Robert Kellar. Please be seated. Thank you.
Mr McConaughey.
On board. Mr McKellar is well aware of the family's views and knows and understands that there is no apology which he can tender which will ever be acceptable to them. But nonetheless, he wishes me on his behalf to indicate that he deeply regrets the trauma that he put the family through. On the night of the 29th of September 2017, it is fully accepted by him he ought not to have been driving. By his plea, he accepts that whilst catastrophically injured, Mr Parsons was alive at the time. Mr McKellar accepts he did not call for assistance. The only explanation which he offers, and the only explanation which perhaps makes sense, is simply fear and panic. Fear for himself and panic for the situation he found himself in. His conduct thereafter became something of a runaway train. Using his words, he says he was too much of a coward to come clean. He sought solace in alcohol and much more significant abuse of cocaine. Mr McKellar found what he had done more and more difficult to live with. And on two separate occasions, he came close to ending his own life. On one occasion, he drove to a remote part of the estate and had a loaded rifle in his mouth, but didn't pull the trigger. In 2020, when he met Caroline and she went to the police, he fully accepts that ultimately she made the right decision in doing so. The finding of Mr Parsons' body and the fact that these proceedings are now coming to an end, to some extent, has meant that there is a very significant weight being lifted from him. He would do anything he could to have the chance to alter the decision he took on the 29th of September, but he can't rewind the clock.
If you have done something and you're not a psychopath, which I've got no reason to believe that they're psychopaths, then it is always going to play in your mind. And I think the older you get, the more you realise that you have to face up to the terrible things that you may or may not have done in life. There must have been a sense of relief that, right, okay, this is happening. They were going to have to face the consequences of what happened that night.
I never seen any remorse from Sandy.
If other people have got a sense that he was remorseful, then fair enough, but it's not anything I ever witnessed. During police interactions with Robert, I didn't really get any real sense of remorse from him either.
Robert McKellar became involved out of a misplaced sense of loyalty to his brother. He made a very significant error of judgment to support his brother at a point in his life where he already feared that his family was breaking up. However, that decision having been made, he accepts that he then participated fully in what was clearly a sustained and determined effort to conceal the truth of his brother's crime, and in so doing he undoubtedly caused Mr. Parsons' family and friends immeasurable pain and suffering.
It really just seemed that they didn't treat Tony Parsons any differently to how they dealt with the carcasses of the animals they killed when they were in their hunting parties.
In my submission, it is fair to say that Robert McKellar bitterly regrets his callous and cowardly actions. He would like the opportunity to communicate directly with Mr. Parsons' family in order to apologise for his actions, but he too is aware of and respects the views of Mr. Parsons' family.
These two individuals have sat in a courtroom listening to all this evidence, and are you only sorry because you've been caught? I don't know. I really don't know.
Mr. McKellar appreciates the awfulness of prison. He is witness to it every day and is kept awake most nights by prisoners in distress, screaming and banging on the walls. But he understands and accepts why he is in prison.
That's not comfort for the family of the victim or his friends or us either. It's not comfort for any of us.
Very well. Alexander McKellar and Robert McKellar, please stand. You have pleaded guilty to grave and serious crimes. I have no doubt that Mr. Parsons' family have been deeply affected by this. I have read and noted the terms of 3 victim impact statements made by members of his family. Their terms clearly indicate the profound, devastating and continuing impact, the lasting effect of which may be incalculable. Nothing I can say or do can compensate for their loss, and I suspect that no sentence would ever be regarded as sufficient in their eyes. Alexander McKellar, I will impose on you a single sentence of imprisonment of 12 years. Robert McKellar, the sentence which I now impose on you is one of a period of imprisonment of 5 years and 3 months. That is all.
I guess on reflection for me, that is a fair result. They've still been convicted of serious and significant crimes. We've provided answers to the family of Tony and we've managed to bring justice.
A drink driver who hit and killed a cyclist has been sentenced to 12 years in prison.
So have we achieved our objective in relation to this investigation? Absolutely.
This is an extraordinary, heartbreaking tale.
Twin brothers Alexander and Robert McKellar sobbed as they were sentenced at Glasgow High Court this morning.
For me, it had to be murder. I absolutely felt that the whole story should have been told in court in front of the jury, because if they heard the whole thing, then there's no way those guys would have got away with it, which I believe they did. With the sentences they got, they definitely got away with it.
Pain and grief seemed to show on the faces of Tony Parsons' family as they left court.
You never thought for one moment that it would be 6 years until we got justice. Nobody can try and fathom out how long that 6 years was. How hard, how traumatising it is.
I don't have any hatred towards these individuals because of my work experience. I've seen these things happen in other scenarios, and I'm fully aware they have family as well that will be going through stresses and things like that. I just wish it never happened.
I love Tony because he was kind. He made me happy. He's looked after me all these years. And I'm lost without Tone. I am making new memories with my grandkids, my son and my daughter. But it still hurts that Tony's not here to see it.
It's getting to the stage where I can see things finally coming to a close. I can see us finally starting to move on. Can't wait for the day where we do actually get together as a family and go, we've done him proud. We brought him home. And that's where he should be.